Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibble, known to my friends as Marv, and this time, thank God, I'm going to be speaking about the greatest band to have ever existed in the world. I'm chatting with the returning guest Kev Brown and Randy Woods, and we're going to speak about Seaside Pod review. Hey guys, thanks for speaking today.
Hey, Marv.
Thanks a lot for having us, Marv. It's good to be back. It's my third appearance. It's crazy. I'm just going to get a regular now, I think.
I know. Randy needs to catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a big pod star like Mr. Brown.
No. We'll bring you on for some special subject or something. I don't know. We'll think of something. I've got a guess now for Christmas music 2025.
There you go.
There we go. So, first of all, I'll ask both of you. But so, what's your earliest memory of Queen?
Oh yeah, so now I'm assuming you've heard the show. So the format of the show is Kev's the Queen expert and I'm the non-Queen expert. So I'm sure Kevin has a story of him pooping his pants and listening to some song or something. But for me, it was when I was 15 or so. I would have heard. I don't even know. Another One Rides the Bus. One of the early Queen's 80s Queen stuff is what I first listened to when I really first became aware of them. And that's when I was learning how to play guitar. So I was very interested in what Brian May was doing and all that stuff. So that's how I came into Queen. But yeah, like I said, Kev will have a touching story that'll warm the cockles of everybody's heart.
And I really don't, though, because Queen's one of those bands like the Beatles, like the Kinks, like T-Rex and Zepp and Deep Purple and all those sort of formative bands for me that were just always there. So I didn't sort of discover Queen. Queen was just always on in our house. So I came out a day after Queen won, and so they've sort of been with me for my entire life. So I've been listening to Queen, on the reg for 51 years.
Right. Now I'm imagining Randy being introduced to Queen through Another One Rides the Bus.
That's because the game was the big US hit, right? I mean, all the Queen fans know they wrote that album to try and get into the American market, and so it was sort of tailored to an American ear for sure. And Another One Bites the Dust was this big sort of funky disco-y thing. So of course that was going to be a bigger thing, I think, over in the US. So I think that a lot of Canadians and Americans, that's when they first were exposed to Queen. But I'm sure We Are the Champions, We Will Rock You, those types of songs would have filtered through, and of course Bo Rap. But I think most people, younger people, might have not been drawn to Bohemian Rhapsody so much, and maybe Another One Bites the Dust would have been a bit more accessible, possibly.
Yeah, I meant Another One Rides the Bus as in the jokey version by what's his name?
Weird Al.
Weird Al Yankovic. Yeah, because he did Another One Rides the Bus, didn't he? With the
my knowledge of Weird Al Yankovic is sadly lacking. And my friend Corey Morissette is a huge Weird Al fan. He's seen him like 7 times or something. But I think I know the Fat, the version of Bad he did by Michael Jackson. I might know a couple of others if you really, really press me, but I'm sadly lacking. I gotta dig in. Gotta learn more.
You've not lived till you've heard Eat It.
I think I've heard that one too. Yeah.
Well, Like a Surgeon is one of his best, I'd say.
Yes, that's brilliant. That one. The film is fantastic.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Have you seen that one, Randy? The Weird Al with Dan Radcliffe?
Yes, I did. Yes.
That is a really good film.
Really great.
Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah.
It's supposed to be completely take the piss. It's not. You know how they say in a lot of films, such as the Bohemian Rhapsody film of Queen, where they've taken poetic license and been a bit funny with history and things. With Weird Al's film, from the offset, that none of it is real whatsoever. He's taking the piss out of the whole thing of a film about musicians and things. Yeah.
I know that the Borat film really divided the fan base, or the hardcore Queen fans hated it because it just chronologically and historically it was a train wreck because they got almost everything wrong, right? But I came at it from the angle that it's a movie based on the lore of Queen more than it is a biopic, really.
Yeah.
And so just sort of getting a little bit of performative, like I thought Rami Malek did a great job as Freddie. I thought the set pieces were good. The Live Aid set piece was a fantastic piece of filmmaking. So I came into it that way, right? It was just a bit of fiction, and if you treat it as that, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was your first Queen purchase, Kev?
With my own money, it definitely would have been the Miracle. I have a distinct memory of taking the bus up into Ashton from Bryn, where I lived at the time with my mum, with my little Sony Walkman. Bought the Miracle because we'd all heard I Want It All, and I think that was the only single that was out before the album came out. And so I was like, great, Queen are back to rock. This is going to be awesome. Plugged it in, sat on the bus on the back seat, and I think I got through all of side A before I got home, and I was like, okay, that's different. Not exactly what I was expecting, but I still loved it because it was Queen. I was 16, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely the first of my own with my own money. That's the first purchase with my own money for sure. And then my sort of my pride and joy when I got it was the Larry Lurex single, which I picked up a record collector from the age of about 17, 18 to about 23, 24 sort of thing. And I picked up that single and I got that for, I think I paid £65 at a record fair in Bolton. And they go for like $600 now because we just actually had this question on the Seaside Pod review last week or the week before, Randy, I think, right? And I was looking up at the value of that and I was like, ooh, that's worth a bit now.
Yes, yeah.
But would you sell it?
No. What's the point of that?
No, exactly.
The kids can when I'm dead because at that point I don't care about.
The point is the money, Kev.
I'd prefer the record.
Yeah. What was your first Queen purchase, Randy?
Yeah, so yeah, my answer is going to be boring again. It would be the greatest hits, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. And I also found out through this podcast there was a few different greatest hits released. So I'm talking about whichever one came to North America. So, and I think that's just the OG, isn't it, Kev? You
I think so, yeah.
I do, yeah.
Yeah.
But in terms of greatest hits, though, Queen's greatest hits it's just top to bottom. I mean, there's not a single second of weakness on that greatest hits. There aren't that many of those, and that was, of course, the days before people put new songs on greatest hits, which was a little bit iffy on.
Yeah. It's interesting that you've just said, Randy, just to go on a tangent, is because of it being Canada, it's strange because sometimes Canada will get records that are based around the English versions of records. I'm thinking the Beatles are famous for that, where their collections were different in America and in England. And it's weird because sometimes Canada you get either the English versions or the American version of an album, and you never know from one day to the next which version of somebody's album that you're going to get sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And then especially as a young guy and long before the internet, I had no idea. I had no idea what. Every once in a while, maybe you'd stumble across something cool you hadn't seen in a record store or something. But beyond that, yeah, we never knew exactly which version we were getting. So it is cool finding all this stuff out later.
But it is like Kev says, it's a very, very good set for a greatest hits compilation because sometimes with some bands you'll get a greatest hits compilation and you'll be like, oh, that's not really a good hit. That's like a lower hit. So I'll skip that one. I'll skip this and listen to this, this, and this. But the Queen's greatest hits is just chock full of songs that you're never going to skip.
I love that it opens with Bohemian Rhapsody too. Most bands wouldn't be able to follow that, but I think for more sort of real deep Queen fans, that's not even the best song on that album. So
yeah, agreed.
But Queen, we'll get to this a bit later as well, but the thing with Queen as well is that they're such a very varied band musically with what they do. When you get a compilation or any album by Queen, it's almost like a compilation because you go from like taking Miracle for instance, which is probably not a good suggestion really. As an example, you get the hard rocking with I Want It All. You've got the pop with The Miracle, I suppose. You've almost got dance music with Invisible Man, and then you've got reggae-ish with My Baby Does Me and all this sort of thing. And so you go from one style to another, and that's what I always find interesting with Queen is the fact that they can go from one thing to another, and 80% to 90% of the time they'll pull it off. Just watch for the 10% when they don't.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's too.
I would say that's sorry, Kev, cut you off, but I would say that's definitely one of the things that attracted me to Queen, and I'm sure the people at large. So if you like a balls out rocker, they got that for you. And then for me, I'm always a sucker for like the Seaside Rendezvous or I don't know, the songs like that where they're playing the old ragtimey style. So for me, I always dig that stuff. But you're right, it is very very cool.
You think the labels must have been like the studio must have been like, oh God, what are we supposed to do with this? Like, they're going out. Nights at the Opera, they come back with this album, and it's got the Prophet song on, and it's got Bohemian Rhapsody on, and it's got Seaside Rendezvous, and it's this massive palette of weird different things that it doesn't fit in a box comfortably. But that's, like you said, I think that's what most Queen fans love about this band is that it was eclectic, and certainly in the 70s, we always talk about this on the podcast, they were setting the trends. They were the guys who were sort of like, everyone has to keep up with us. They were never looking at what was popular and trying to do that. They were saying, we're just going to do what we do, and we do what we do better than anyone else. And you can try and do this if you want to, but good luck. And then in the 80s, there was just that switch into, okay, let's try and do this. And that's where the wheels started to wobble.
Yeah,
just
when
a
they were
little bit.
chasing trends, they were never too terribly successful, in my opinion.
But I think
Yeah.
they had the plus to them, or the positive is that they recorded the first album, Queen One, as it's called now, but the original self-titled, they'd recorded that, and by the time that album came out, they were already getting prepared to do the follow-up album. So it was like a one-two in a way. So before the first album had any chance to put the record label off in a way because it didn't really do very much, they got the second album out, and what really helped Queen, and I don't know whether Randy would know about this, but Kev will, what really helped Queen there with the second album was the emergency last minute fill in that they did on Top of the Pops for Seven Seas of Rye, because
Yeah.
David Bowie was supposed to do a performance on there, pulled out at the last minute, and they contacted Queen to see if Queen could come on and do this song that was just bordering coming onto the charts. Oh, can you come on and just do Seven Seas of Rye? And I think that was really smart and really lucky for them that they got that chance, and that brought up the sales of Queen 2 and of Seven Seas of Rye as well. So when they came to doing Sheer Heart Attack, the third album, they got that little bit of something to pull on the record company, and they could go, okay, that's been popular. Let's see where the third album goes. And then it just rocketed from there, going up and up and up and up till the end of the 70s.
But you see Freddie then, right? That's monumental in Queen's development in terms of sort of how big they are in the public's consciousness. Is once you see Freddie and you see Brian and you see Roger behind the kit, and not so much John maybe in the early days, but Freddie was so magnetic and dynamic that just as a visual bit of theatre,
Yeah.
you could sort of, that's going to start people talking, hey, did you see that guy on Top of the Pops last night? That was really, the song was cool, but did you see that lead singer? So you've got that kind of extra bit that was lacking if you just listened to the radio, I think.
Also
Yeah.
goes to show that a little bit of luck doesn't hurt, hey?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what do I mean by the third point on my sheet? The song. What's your song when it comes to Queen? Or what is the song that you would suggest to people?
Ooh.
So,
Yeah, it's the one that we talk about sometimes on the pod and with fans. It's hard to not say Bohemian Rhapsody because it's that thing of it's no more Queen. It's their signature song. It's the one that if you don't like that, you're probably not going to like. There will be something in Queen you like, but you're probably not going to fall in love with Queen if you don't like that song. So I sort of would probably go to that one, or Somebody to Love would be the other one. And those are the two I would almost invariably pick.
What about Don't Stop Me Now?
Yeah, I mean, you could throw that one in there too, but that's got very little Brian on it, right? So it's not as quintessentially Queen, maybe. I don't
I
know.
don't know. That's pretty
We Will
Queeny.
Rock You. That's a huge song. Another one Bites the Dust. I don't know, because most bands have one or two tentpole songs that are sort of just head and shoulders above most of everything else they did.
yeah.
Queen have got 6, 7 that I could point to and say any one of those would be that level, Randy, I think, right?
Yeah, I would say for sure. But I guess if you're trying to convince somebody to listen to Queen, and what song would you give them, right? Any of their number one hits, just any of them would I'm
Yeah.
sure would do it.
Killer Queen. I mean, you could
Maybe
go Killer Queen.
maybe don't play them Invisible Man, or
Or the Miracle.
there's a couple there. Yeah,
Yeah,
Friends
yeah.
will be friends. No thanks.
yeah.
Yeah, Invisible Man. Yeah, Roger Taylor suddenly hears "Pump Up the Volume" and thinks, "I can steal that rhythm and use it for
Yeah,
another song."
yeah,
God Almighty, it is abject, and I know there's lots of people who love that song.
yeah. There's lots of people who love it, of
but
course.
I don't know. It's okay. It's Queen for kids, right? And that's fine. That's fine.
I enjoyed it as an 18-year-old going to clubs, but I don't really enjoy it as much now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the wealth of material from Queen means that you can almost sort of like fit the song of choice to whatever somebody's listening is, really. You could sort of
Yeah.
go, "What are you into? Oh, you're into Metallica." You could go to Stone Cold Crazy because Metallica have done it. Oh,
Yeah.
so you could get to that. Or do you like Motown? You're My Best Friend. That will be right there in your wheelhouse. But so that's the other good thing about the variety that they do is that you can almost tailor it to introducing Queen to people according to what they listen to.
Yeah. And I think part of that too comes from having four songwriters. Because a band that only has one or two songwriters, they'll sort of, most people have a wheelhouse and they do one style really, really well. Like, you don't get that. I mean, you've got your Stings and the Art and Princes and those kinds of guys, you could do basically anything. But most people have sort of a lane that they tend to stay in. I think when you've got that four people who are all really strong songwriters, I think they're probably one of the only bands I know of, maybe Zepp would be another, who had four members of the band each had a top 10 hit. You can count on the fingers of one hand, really, the number of bands who have that, right? So I think when you've got that diversity just in the songwriting department, of course, that's going to make you a little bit broader in terms of what you can deliver.
And further to that, when they go off on their own and they don't have those other two or three or whoever they're collaborating with, telling them, "Hey, no, dude, that idea sucks. Don't do that." That guy's not there, so then they do it, and then what do you get?
You
Mixed
get Roger
results.
Taylor's Nazis
Yeah.
1994, and it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So somebody tells Roger that, "Oh, this song doesn't work for us," and Roger just says, "Oh, shove it."
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. Nice. Nice little reference to the cross there from Marv. I love it. Quite like that song, actually.
So I think we've already touched on this in a way, but what is it about Queen that, as a band, pulls you in? Randy, I'll go to the person who's the least knowing of Queen.
Yeah, and anybody who's listened to the pod, we talk about this pretty much continually, and in my opinion, it's Freddie Mercury. It's his vocal that he the way he delivers it, the emotion, his range, his flaws, all of it, and then his songwriting. And I'm not to take away from the other guys. Obviously, like I said, I'm a guitar player, so I was super interested in Brian May and all the things he does. But I'm just only say all of that to say that I don't think that Queen would be we wouldn't be here talking about this if it wasn't for Freddie Mercury, despite the talent of all of them. So I would say that's probably what initially brought me to Queen.
Yeah, we've talked about lots, right? Roger Taylor could have been the lead singer in a lot of those early sort of 70s rock bands because he's got a great singer. He's a fantastic drummer. He was on the sort of lookout for Genesis almost. We're sort of thinking about bringing him in instead of Phil Collins or in that area.
True.
So they're all really, really talented musicians. And I think Brian especially would have, that talent would have come out somewhere. He would have been in a band that would have been maybe not Queen level, but I think most of them were just too good of musicians and songwriters to not get somewhere with a little bit of luck. But Freddie was the X factor, right? That you can't get around that. That no one had that voice, no one had that stage presence. So yeah, I mean, I think what it is about Queen is it's the same thing it is about Led Zeppelin. You've got four guys who just click perfectly, right? If you take one element out, it just doesn't work quite the same. I mean, it's still good, but it's never going to be quite what it is. It's not Queen without all four of them, and that's why I think a lot of those albums where they were recording tracks separately from each other and they weren't all in the studio, I think that material is just a little bit weaker because it's not really quite Queen like it was in the 70s and then toward the end again.
Yeah, on the Kind of Magic album, I think that's why the song One Vision stands out and Prince of the Universe stands out as well. Because for both of those songs, unlike the rest of the songs on that album, from what I've noticed with the studio bits that we see here and there, the videos, those two songs, they're in the studio together in a sense, actually laying down the guides, which is we've all been in bands in different in different things, so we know what it's like. That it's different when you're in a live room with a band. There's a different sort of energy there that you put into a song than you do if you record. Someone goes in, they play their part. Someone goes in, they play their part over the top. And there's just something magical about that moment when it clicks in a live room together.
Yeah. I completely agree. And as a matter of fact, that's my preferred way to track when I'm recording an album. Now, it's not always possible, but yeah, it does bring an energy, and it's immediate, and you can tell if something's working right away. So, yeah, it's the best way. And take that a step further, if you get a chance to play those songs in front of an audience before you get to the studio, even better.
But in one of your other episodes, actually, you've mentioned that it's a strange thing as well with Queen, where with some other bands they'll play material leading up to or whatever, but Queen never hardly ever did that. I think you just mentioned what in your episode in one of the episodes they only did it once. I think you were saying with one song where I can't remember which song it was that they
I think You'd Take
did.
My Breath Away. They was sort of famously played at a quite a big, I can't remember which gig it was now, I think maybe Hyde Park, maybe, where Freddie just sort of ripped this song out. But Queen didn't tend to do that as much. They were more album tour cycle. So they'd go into the studio, write the album, and then they'd go out. But yeah, there's loads of bands who, yeah, this is a song of our upcoming album, or you'll gonna get bootlegs from 2 years before it was even recorded.
But that's why the first album stands out in a sense, and why it's awful in a way that Queen have looked down on that first initial album in some ways, because there's that first album to me. I think Randy said it that in an episode about one of the songs off there, that it's the blueprint for what Queen will be. In a sense, you've got it all there on that first album, and to me, it's got that immediacy because they've honed that material from already having played it already in their live set. And
Yep.
we all know that when you've done that, you've owned it, you've got it perfected in you as a band to go into the studio and you give it a different feel, a bit like when you've done an album in the studio later in your career, and then that song has a life of its own that it grows when you go into a live setting with it, whereas the first album it's already got to that growth.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I've said this as well. I'm a singer songwriter myself. After having played the song live for a few years, man, I wish I could just go back in the studio and just do that version, and that original version, just throw that in the garbage, and because this is what I really meant for it to be. So, and I'm not sure exactly how much road work they got before they recorded that first album. I'm assuming it must have been quite a bit. Hey.
There was a couple of years at least, yeah. They had songs in the set like Hangman and Stone Cold Crazy was in the set long before they recorded it. So they did have it was a small sort of set list, and they used to do a few covers and whatnot, but they were definitely a band before they were a studio act, which isn't always the case. I know I think that's weird too, right? With a lot of the modern acts where you go into the studio and record an album before you've ever done a tour, or before you've ever played like 100, 200, 300 gigs in small clubs. It's a weird way around to do it. And I know that, I think in rock and roll, I think that there's a sort of an education part that I think is probably important. It probably isn't, but it just feels like it should be.
Paying your dues.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I find that weird, like you said, where they'll sign an act and then they'll put them in the studio, like you said, and like, here's the material, go and do this. And then you go and tour it afterwards. And like you said, it's a bit weird that they haven't had that grounding. But then again, that's speaking to a problem that we've got with the modern world, which is a lack of venues nowadays for bands to go and do that, which is irritating to me, because I used to love that, going out and checking out bands at pub gigs and things that we don't get so much now.
Yeah,
There used to be a band in pretty much every pub in the northwest of England. That was the entertainment. You didn't have a jukebox; you had the band playing, right? And that was just what it was.
Yeah,
there was a band at every little watering hole in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. There used to be a band everywhere. Sorry, Marv, cut you off.
I was going to say where I live now in this town that I live in, we used to be able to gig and we could do a different pub for a month, 2 gigs a week, just in
Yeah.
this town, and then split it going to the next town, and then or towns close, and we'd have like 5 gigs a week in the same 3 towns, but all in different pubs over 1 month or 2 months. And it's not like that now, which is an awful situation to be in.
Yeah, and you don't get the big artists, or you certainly don't get maybe as what's the word I'm looking for, as road worn an artist if you don't have all of those little places for them to play and fail and do well or not do well or whatever. And it's no different here. There used to be many places to play. There are maybe 4 places to play now in a city of 300,000.
So, and it is an interesting tangent as well that I've written down in the notes. The song or the album. And what I mean by that is it's something that bugs me because I'm somebody who likes the long form of an album, personally. But the way that the world is at the moment, there's a lot of people who put down the album and they almost say that the era of an album has gone in some cases, some people say, whereas now basically a record, an album is just, it is, for most acts, just a load of songs where they've got the hits, and then there's these songs that were written that weren't good enough to be hits and we'll just throw on the album. Whereas in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s as well, to a degree, there was an art to an album and sequencing an album and that. So it's a worry of mine that that's a lost art in itself. The art of creating a whole piece of work from songs that they've put together.
I think maybe it's the world's attention span, hey, is gone. I don't know if you guys listened to Rush 2112 when you were a young kid and put that on your and just blown away how they tied everything together, even just little sound effects and all stuff. It was just like, oh my god. So that's just an example of something that isn't happening out in the world. And yeah, I think it is. I think it is a shame. Instead of just like you say, a collection of singles on something, you know what I mean? That like Zeppelin, all those guys, they were writing albums.
Yep.
What was the song we covered last week, Kev? That little short little piano thing.
Nevermore. Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Nevermore.
Like that Nevermore. Like, hey, let's stick that in the middle of these 2 songs. Like they were like you were saying, they were programming
That's a
that out.
beautiful
You know what I
snippet,
mean?
that is.
So yeah, it is a lost art, and I think it's a shame. As much as I like a good single too, right?
Yeah, and I think that we talked about this last too, and it is still happening. I just picked up an album last year by Greenlung, This Heathen Land,
Yeah.
which is amazing, and that's a concept album. And you just like Dream Theater is still doing this with their new release Parasomnia. There's a through line through that one. There are bands doing it. They're just not being played on the radio, right? So they're just not big commercial, successful in the sort of commercial sense entities, but they are still out there. It's just I think in the pop world, yeah. I mean, it's shuffle, it's Spotify, right? I mean, it's the single that is king. You look at artists now. I talked to a young lad, a young artist, Matt Jaffe, on my Petty podcast, and he released his last album, but he released all 10 songs on it as singles before he released the album. Because he said, like, in the age of Instagram and the age of sort of social media, you need that constant drip rather than, there's my album, go listen to it. That just doesn't work anymore.
And
That,
actually,
yeah.
sorry, just one
Go on.
quickly further to that,
Yeah.
you need 15-second snippets of you
Yeah.
doing something, and that's gonna sell your.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marv.
Yeah, I was going to say that lends itself to a quote that Robert Fripp from King Crimson came out with, where he was saying that his issue used to be with streaming, and he used to say that to him, it doesn't really work with some progressive music because we're talking progressive there with King Crimson and that. So I think that's an issue as well, where he was saying that if you get the songs out of sync, they don't make as much sense.
Yeah.
And also he said that there's something about some record companies. He said he's worried that if he left it in their hands with progressive music, they might tend towards the edit slightly to fit things in.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Side Black of Queen too, right? And that's every time we've done a song from Queen 2, I've sort of, with Randy's not heard it before, which he hasn't any of the songs on that side, apart from the last one, 70s of Rye. I've tended to always say, I'll play you a little bit of the song before and a little bit, just so you can see where it fits, because contextually, that is important. You need to know where it fits, because as a standalone, it might still be a good song and a good bit of music, but when you hear it in sequence, it's like, okay, that makes way more sense now when I hear all of it.
Yeah. Am I remembering this right? Because it's my favourite Queen album. Does Nevermore that go into March of the Black Queen?
Sure does. Fairy Fellas into Nevermore into March of the Black Queen. What
Yeah.
a three-song sequence.
Yeah. It's like sheer art attack. You've got a few songs there that they have to be listened to one after the other, because
Yeah.
you've got one before Bring Back That Leroy Brown that leads into that, and then Leroy Brown leads into She Makes Me, I think.
When you've got Tenement Funds to Flick of the Wrist, Lily of the Valley, or Flick of the Wrist, Lily of the Valley, definitely those two. That's a pair, right? I mean, you listen to those together, really.
Yeah, but maybe that helped with Queen initially as well, because then when they got the album sales with the second Queen 2, that might have made the record company think more in the way of like a band like Yes or Genesis, who were album sales, and think, oh, still got a good band here if they sell albums. But then they surprised the record company EMI by suddenly having a hit single with Killer Queen and Now I'm Here off the third album.
Yeah. You think about I always think about this too with the really great bands. Like I always look at the Beatles too. You think about how much they grew musically in that sort of 7 years that they were actually putting albums out. And you think about Queen 1 to Night at the Opera. It's the same type of thing, right? Where it's just this upward trajectory of creativity and just throwing as much ink as you can at the page and seeing what lands, and most of it does. And after that, you get Day at the Races, where they know exactly what they're doing now, and they put out this perfect sort of pop rock record with Somebody to Love on it, and You and I, and all these, and Tie Your Mother Down. So it's got everything. And then they said, now we're established. Now we can basically sort of be a little bit more experimental. We can try and do things in a different way. So I think that sort of that growth and the labels allowing them to do that, I don't think that exists anymore either, right? Where say Taylor Swift is much maligned in the serious music world. But I think if she sort of said, look, I've got this prog idea that I want to do this kind of concept album,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think the label will be like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, what you're doing right now is selling millions of records and making a lot of money. Let's just stick with the formula, Taylor. You know what I mean? I don't know if she's probably big enough that she could do, but I don't know how much leeway she would be given anymore.
No. That's an interesting comparison to beat the Beatles, because I've only just thought about this, saying the 7 years. So if you look at the 7 years of Queen, initial 7 years of Queen, you go from Queen 1 to the Game. And that is a hell of a change and a hell of a upward trajectory, really, to that. So, right, we've got the history, what your knowledge of Queen, so people know that you know your onions, as we say. So you've got this knowledge of Queen. Kev is a huge fan from back when. Randy is a fan of the hits originally, and then being introduced to all these album songs. So what was the impetus to starting the show?
Well, so I started listening to a show, my friend Corey's show, and the podcast Will Rock. And I loved the format. And I'd never sort of thought that you could do a music show that was also, or like a music criticism or a music appreciation show that was also entertainment based, where it wasn't as much about the sort of picking apart, oh, this is a C minor and he's playing it over an F and there's this juxtaposition, this countermelody, like that, but just more about the banter and the fun and that side of it, and then introducing this random element. So I thought, you know what, me and Randy had done a podcast right around the pandemic that we did 11 episodes. I've had a good time doing it, but it was a hell of a lot of work because we were always booking guests and it was just a lot more work. So I thought I'd love to do a show with Randy again, and I think that Queen would really work because with a show format like ours, you need a band where it's not a consistent quality. It works way better if you've got highs and lows and plenty middle, but if there's highs and lows, it just makes the show format pop more. Yeah. So I just said, hey, dude, do you want to do a podcast? He said, yeah, and we put our first episode out November 3rd, 2022, and we're still rolling, dude. Yeah. Much to Randy's amazement.
I'm on the verge of quitting at all times, just so everybody knows that.
Yeah. But just so nobody gets worried, he's only thinking of quitting so he can start the church.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, I noticed on your notes too, by the way, Marv, he's not the Pope. There is no Pope in the church of Go Fuck Yourself, just the Cardinal. That's the top.
Of course, he's a Monsignor.
I still got to apply to be the rector. That's what we decided. I was going to be the rector at some point, but I've
There
still
you
haven't
go.
got my
Yeah.
application in yet. So
Yeah, you could do it. Yeah. You get your paperwork set up and we'll see what we can do.
this is great because none of your listeners have got a clue what we're talking about. I love it.
No, no. And Jesse's going to edit those F's out of it anyway.
Oh, so sorry. I can try to not do that if you want.
I don't give a shit. But it also works because you're both coming at it from different angles in a sense as well. So I'm going to bring this up, and I think Randy expects this every time he talks to a Queen fan that we're going to bring this up, and I'm going to say such as, and there's no negativity to this at all. I think it's fantastic that there's this difference of opinion. But the Prophets song, for instance, that's the one that sticks, isn't it? It's the like, whoa, hold on a minute, that surprised everybody. But it shows how you both look at the subject from different angles perfectly.
I think Kev thought the podcast was over when I dusted that song. That was episode 2. Is that you give me that? And of course, you see, I had no frame of reference. I didn't know that all you Queenies and weirdo Queen fans that was the best thing that ever happened to you. I didn't know that. You know what I mean? So I was just listening, and if you listen to my comments, I think they stand out. It's a long, bloated ride to nowhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
suppose I could see that. Yeah, yeah.
There's no contrition. There's no
middle
contrition.
section. It's that middle section that does your head in, isn't it, Randy?
No, but anyhow, I don't know. Hopefully, I've redeemed myself. I'd like to bring up there's been a number that's been turned into a verb because of this guy here, who 39, another song I didn't realize we were supposed to love, but I think I actually upvoted that one. So
You did.
It's just oftentimes these songs I could upvote them or downvote
I haven't
them
got there yet.
depending on how I feel about that day, right?
And we should say too that I think we could talk about podcasts and podcasting, Marvin. I think that's one thing that if you're giving advice to podcasters, I think don't try and manufacture that. Because Randy and I never say, "Oh, you downvote that and I'll upvote this," and that'll create a bit of controversy. I think if it's real, people know that and they respond to that much better than if you're just doing it for, like, if it's a clickbaity type of thing. That comes across, man. You can tell when people are just doing it just to get a reaction. Where all of our reactions to these songs are genuine, and when Randy downvotes something, I'm like, "What are you serious? You're downvoting this?" But that gives us then something to talk about, and it's always fun when that happens.
Yeah, and you can tell that it's real as well, and I mean from both sides as well. This is so when Randy downvotes something that obviously Kev is going to think, "Oh, this is an absolute banger." You can hear it in Kev's voice, and he says it out loud. And I'm not going to say it out loud now, the actual phrase, but you can hear him thinking, "What the?" And you can tell that he's being honest. But then on the other hand, you get the same from Randy when Kev will download something and Randy will be like, "What the?" And he can't understand how you've downvoted something either.
Well, it's nice because there's lots of overlap in our musical taste, but we do have very different sort of, I would say our sort of baseline is different. So that's really good for, I think, and I think it's definitely been good for me because I've picked up loads of stuff from Randy over the years that I would never have listened to otherwise. And I think that maybe I've spoon fed him 2 or 3 songs that he's ended up liking. But I think having that difference, I think if we were both just kind of grand rock guys, there's nothing to talk about on a show then, right? Because it becomes homogenous and it becomes, we're just, "Oh yeah, I love that. Oh, you love that? I love that." That's not interesting to me, right?
You've got to have difference, in my opinion. That's what makes a show with multiple presenters makes it more interesting, is when you've got people who come at things from a different angle, and one will go, "Yeah, I like that," and then another one, "I'm not so sure, I'm a bit half and half," and then another one is like, "Oh, I fucking hate that thing, it's terrible."
I think ultimately we mostly end up agreeing.
Yeah.
If we look at, if Captain Spreadsheet pulled up his spreadsheets there, I would say that we're probably more together than apart, right?
Oh yeah, I think over 85. I think we're about 85% where we vote the same way.
Yeah.
And even when we don't, quite often I'll say to you, I understand I understand every single point you've made.
Yeah,
But again, there's either a sentimental thing or I just, for some reason, it's that thing of a song can be crap and you can still enjoy it. We've all got those songs where we think it's fundamentally the lyrics are stupid, the riff is basic, whatever, all those things, but I still just enjoy it. And that's the beauty of the subjectivity of music. And that's why I love music podcasts and music podcasting.
Yeah. You'll find eventually that Randy will be a lover of Fun in Space by Roger Taylor.
I actually just picked it up on vinyl the other day, funnily enough.
That is a great that is a good cover.
Pretty soon, Kev's going to start his Chumbawamba podcast too. So
you take that back. You take that back right now, Woods.
Oh dear, that was some knockdown you did there.
Cannot tell you how much I despise that band. Anyway, just that one song.
That's the only song I know by them.
So have you mentioned the show format then? So it's random, and you've got this machine that you spin.
So we essentially lifted the format wholesale from my friend Corey's podcast. I was like, dude, this is a great format, and I think it's one of those things. I don't know if you watch Taskmaster, Marv. I don't know if you're a fan of the TV show.
Yep.
The format does a lot of the heavy lifting on that show because the format's so well conceived that you just need to make sure you don't screw it up. Plug and play good people into those kind of roles, and it just works. And I think the same thing with so we've got all our Queen songs loaded onto a wheel that we spin. Whatever song comes up, that's what we talk about. And then we've got a binary system for upvote or downvote between the two of us. Then we put that out to the people. We research it on the fly. So, we've got Queenpedia, and we've got a couple of Queen books that we do. We do as much as we can. Then I'll sort of, if I know anything about it from my history with Queen, I'll bring that in. But we sort of do it on the fly. And I think that doing it that way gives it that very organic, very off-the-cuff, spontaneous feel that I think that's what people enjoy about it. Like if we knew, Randy, next week we're going to talk about the Prophet song, and we sit down and overanalyze it, it becomes a bit more, it comes drier and maybe more useful if you want music analysis. But I think in terms of entertainment, I think you would just lose a bit of that spontaneity.
We often default to our listeners who are definitely more of an expert than I am, and we'll say something. Hey, and if anybody knows better, please let us know. And it happens, right? But yeah, Queen all the songs we use that. That's the other book we use quite a bit.
Yeah. In my blog, I've actually responded to something that Randy asked in an episode. But you probably know this fact already because Randy said something about Trident Studios when they were recording the Queen 1 album, and you said you weren't sure whether they got 8 or 16 or whatever tracks, and it was 8. It was still an 8-track at that point. And I put that in my blog because I just know this rubbish for some reason.
I love it. That's great.
I know it because the Beatles went there to record because they needed more tracks for to do a record of a song. So they went to tried it in the late 60s. And they recorded there because that had an 8-track, but Abbey Road only had a 4-track. Still.
Amazing what they got done with the 4-track, eh?
Oh my God. We've talked about this too, Randy, that the purists who say 4-track is, the Beatles did it on 4 tracks, so that should be good enough. If the Beatles had 128 tracks or 250, they would have flipping used them. There's all this nonsense about, let's go back to analog.
No.
Yeah, but all the bands who were recording in analog would record in digital because it's just better. It's easier. It's more convenient.
It's a fool's errand, and I think what when people say things like that, it's just more in the how things were done. Yeah. So you had to be better rehearsed. You had to be a little more professional at your instrument. You had to know your song better. Studio time was very expensive, so you went in there and you knew you went boom boom boom. You got in, you got out. And there again, as we were talking earlier, you're probably doing it mostly live in the studio, so it's got that great feel. And I think that's what those are the kinds of things that people are really looking back for when they talk about the old days, because there's no question that Pro Tools is going to sound better than that old reel to reel back there. Tape saturation, whatever, that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, that's the way I feel about it.
Yeah, that reminds me of the Queen story with Bohemian Rhapsody, where they're on about the tape that they'd recorded so much onto this tape that you could actually see clear through the tape. They'd recorded it so much that it was damaging the tape eventually, how much they were overdubbing on it.
Yeah, that's another real thing. Yeah, you're having your tape wear out, which happens.
Things are so much more difficult back then, but also interesting, because I remember when I used to work as a tape op in a studio, and it's a completely different beast altogether now, where you've got all this digital and you've got Pro Tools, and you've got as many tracks as you like, essentially. But back then, there were sort of things like when you'd have to sync two different recorders together, for instance. That used to be a nightmare trying to get those links. You'd be sort of like play at the same time and record at the same time. It was just, but it was also interesting at the same time to record that way.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. So, hey, Marv, did you guys use SMPTE timecode to sync them back then, or how would you sync them?
Yeah, yeah. In the early '90s, we were using zip code. It was all because they were on the verge of going into digital at the studio I was at anyway.
Yeah,
When I
yeah.
went back a few years later to record, they'd already gone over to digital, and I was a bit pissed off that they sold all the analog equipment without telling me that they were selling it, because I would have bought all that.
Yeah, shoot, that'd be nice to have now. My first album I recorded in a studio was with eight tracks, right?
Yeah.
And and there was four of them, and then of course they all had to chase each other, and it was SMPTE time code. But sometimes some of them just wouldn't play, or they would play too late, or so you're forever stopping and starting, and and that was still digital, but the old mechanical format, what a ball ache.
But I think people talk about creativity, and I think that the mechanical nature of recording back in the old days allowed people to mess around with that, speeding the tape up, slowing the tape down, reversing it, doing things, putting like flutter effects by putting a bit of a tape on the roll. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's where the term flangers, because they would push on the
Anyway. So all those things, I think that's a good thing. But it's not to say that you can be creative in other ways now. You've got all this digital stuff. You can still be just as creative as long as you've got the curiosity and the desire to go and do something for which the machine wasn't intended. That's when you get interesting results, I think. So it's still there. You just got to have the wherewithal to do it.
If I want to put reverse reverb on a vocal now, as opposed to back then when I used to have to play it backwards, and then record the reverb onto a separate track of a tape, so that you get that reversed reverb that way. Nowadays, you just reverse it on your computer, put reverb on, whatever reverb you want on it, put it back to normal, and you've got that reverse reverb for the vocal as it comes in, like and then the voice coming. I love that effect on vocals. Queen did that a lot.
Yes, they did. Yeah, and you're right. Plus all those generations that the generations of tape, and it would start to sound worse and worse, and yeah.
Not Queen related, but that's famous. The tape damage is famous for Sly and the Family Stone, when he did There's a Riot Going On, that album, and they were saying that there were that many overdubs and redubs that's why that's got that mushy sort of cool mushy sound to that Sly and the Family Stone album, because he's worn the tape that badly that it just all mushes together, the actual sound does, and gives it that feel.
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. Also, great album.
So, recording and editing then of the show. Kev.
Yeah, so we record over Zoom, and then I whack everything to Adobe Audition, pull out all my sound clips that I want to download as we go through. And if Randy will mention The Simpsons, or if we do a little quote, because we're nothing if not consistent with our stealing from other places, then I'll just drop a little sound bite in. And then, of course, we've got loads of little incidental bits of music, and Randy does so much on the Tweet of the Week, did the intro, all the outros, all that kind of stuff. And we've got this sort of nice library now of different things I can just pull and throw in here, there, and everywhere. And those little memes and sort of lore bits that come in through, as you do a podcast for longer, things just drift in. Again, we've got the GFY thing. We've got there's little memes that come up. We've got like little jingles for some of our listeners when they submit comments. So that kind of develops organically and naturally. But we're, again, very lucky that I've got a best friend who is an extraordinary musician, producer, engineer, who can just say, "Hey, Randy, we need this for the show." And he can just turn around and do it, right? Now, I'll say the bad word, but I do use AI as well for some stuff, because if it's like 12 o'clock at night and I've got to get the edit done by 12:15 and I want a stupid rap, then I can't really get a hold of Randy. I'll just whack that into Suno and we just turn it around that way too. But again, I think having that customized music that Randy puts into the show is another sort of thing that makes it stand out a little bit for us, I think.
Yeah. Randy's music I was introduced to through Tom Petty Project, because that
Nice.
music that he provides for that is just fabulous. Before you
Yeah.
told me when we talked before, I actually thought that a lot of that was like the songs, but of Tom Petty's, because the versions are just so good that Randy's done that it sounds almost like alternate mixes of the originals in some cases.
He's a talented boy.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's just my Stratocaster and probably that 11 rack right there. And I would imagine I just recorded on that. Yeah, which I haven't done those in an awful long time, Kev.
Season
Get
12's
AI
coming
to
up.
do them now.
No, I'm going to get you to do. I've got to get you to do. I just reused.
I've got my workhorse of a Telecaster down there. That's my guitar of choice.
Oh man, yeah, you can't go wrong with a Tele. I love a Tele, and you know what? One of the few guitars I've never owned. There's lots of guitars I haven't owned, but I should have had a Telecaster by now.
The logo then of the show.
That's Mr. Brown again, the talented Mr. Brown.
I just went with a simple typeface for that one. The Tom Petty Projects has got a fairly elaborate sort of designed logo. Ultimate Catalog Clash is similarly, but with Seaside Pod Review, I thought that just like a real high impact sans serif font that would work for what we were doing. And of course, we've got for the artwork for the show, we mimicked the Queen 2 album cover just with the two of us. Yeah. So it's the two of us 2 times each, right? So I thought that would be fun, and it was. I don't know. I think it looks okay. I think it kind of gets the point across of what the show is. I think when you see that, it's like, okay, this is a Queen podcast. You can tell straight away, right? You know what it is.
I need to dig out one that somebody did of me when I did Movember years ago, and somebody just decided as a joke, because I used to put up daily how I was going with the Movember online, and somebody actually did that and took 4 of those pictures and did me in the Queen 2 sort of
nice
pose or whatever, and did that as a bit of a, here you go, Marv, you'll love this.
There you go.
Yeah, because Recovering Queen, one of the other Queen podcasts, they did their sort of artwork is the hot space cover, so they've got 3 of them. Then they'll put another one into the square, so I couldn't use that one. But the name too was Randy, and we were throwing different ideas around. And I'm famously terrible at naming podcasts. So Corey's better at it than me. Randy's better at it than me. And as soon as I saw Seaside Pod Review, I'm like, well, there you go. That's that one. We've got to use that one because that's just so good.
But it fits really with the song as well.
Yeah, it really does work.
Also, another one I like to do on the ukulele as well as Good Company, by the way.
Great. We posted that on, I think you'd sent me a link to that on Insta. You'd sent me a
Good Company.
So good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Who doesn't like playing the ukulele? So, have you got a standout moment from the show?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a standout moment, but I'll tell you this, and Kev alluded to it earlier. First of all, he asked me to do this, and I was like, yeah, sure. Tuesday nights, we'll drink beer in his house, and I'll drink beer in my house, and we'll talk about Queen, whatever. Great. So there's no standout moment. Just the fact that anybody listens to it, even to this day, I'm still shocked. I don't know why people listen to it. I don't know why they would care about my opinion. I'm a stranger on the internet, and Kev's a stranger on the internet. So. And I don't listen to podcasts, I guess. So maybe that's why I don't get it. But yeah, just that anybody's even interested in what we have to say is probably the biggest sort of thrill of all of it.
For me, there's been a few. Yeah, Randy dusting the Prophet song. So obviously our format is that when it comes to the end, when we're voting up and down, I should have said that our method of doing that is we say it bites the dust, or it's one of the champions. That's our metric for that. So episode 2. Coming out the gate, the first time we'd spun the wheel, because the first episode we just picked the first song from the first album, Keep Yourself Alive. Randy dusts the Prophet song. I'm like, this might tank the podcast. We might be done. Like the hardcore might just say, well, not listen to this crap anymore because this guy's an idiot. However, I think that and especially there's a long time listeners we have, are smart and don't underestimate your audience, I guess is what I'm saying. Is I think they saw what it was and that, okay, it's just not for him sort of thing. And he explained exactly why. It's not just saying, oh, it's crap, I don't like it. He gave reasons for that. One definitely was like a pivotal moment for me, because I think it also established the dusting idea, the idea that to dust something, that again sort of established that as a thing. I don't remember exactly when it was that you adopted the Cardinal persona, but that was, again, that in sort of establishing the lore of the show and the personality, that was a big part of it as well. And then when whatever episode it was where I said, I'm just trying to pod over here, and you just died laughing. That made me laugh so hard watching you laugh. But I think the biggest sort of standout moment for me was establishing the Discord channel, and that community that we have now that is on Discord has been a huge positive part of my life now for 12 months or so, and it's a wonderful community of people who are super supportive. There's no real negativity on there, and it's a great place to hang out. So having that sort of establishing that community was a huge part of sort of validating why we would even bother doing this and spending our time podcasting every week.
I alluded to it with the Prophet song when I mentioned it earlier on, which was the fact that I think Queen fans, the more open Queen fans, shall we say, understand that people have differing opinions. So essentially, what Randy was saying was, look, this song just isn't my cup of tea, and we were able to accept that, and then just say, hold on a minute, this is it proved there and then that this was a show that wouldn't pander to this, that, and the other. It's a show that they'll just be balls out. This is what I think, and honesty, and that is something that I think pushes the show more than some other shows do. There is that honesty there where you don't beat around the bush. You'll just say, I don't like that song, or I do like that, or there's this little thing that I don't like about it. Oh, I don't like that sitar sounding guitar in Jealousy.
I don't like the electronic drums. Period.
Yeah, I guess you couple that with me not thinking anybody would listen, so we were just especially those early ones, we were just talking pretty unfiltered, I'd imagine.
And it's that unfiltered bit of it that is the thing that pulls people in, I think, because it's like listening to your buddies talking with each other about these things, like we all do when we get together with mates. We chat to each other about, and this is what it is. It's just you're talking to each other like you would if you met in the pub together or whatever. Yeah.
I don't know if this has ever happened for me. My wife I'll have gone out with somebody and she'll say, "Oh, what did you guys talk about?" And be like, "Oh, I don't know what the fuck I talked about." So now my wife listens to the podcast, so she knows exactly what we're talking about, and she drops her little advice in on things I should do. She told me a couple of weeks ago that I should be 10% nicer to Kevin, and I like that she picked 10% because she gets it, but she says maybe just dial it back a titch. So I did. Or did I?
No, I'm absolutely opposed to that. I'm opposed to any reduction in the in the grief you give me because I love it.
Yeah, you're supposed to be not giving a.
I think that we're going to get into this, Marv, in this next question about sort of advice for podcasters.
Yeah.
Again, I think it goes back to me and Randy on the show. It's slightly, ever so slightly exaggerated sometimes because obviously it is a podcast. It isn't just a conversation. And there are things where we'll say, actually, we'll take that out because if we're talking about something in our personal lives, or we just think, maybe we shouldn't be doing that. But for the most part, this is just how we talk to each other. And these are the things, like Randy said, these are the things that we talk about. And I think that when you approach it that way and you do let someone drop in on your conversation with your best friend, talking about things that you talk about, that's the only way it works for me. So I think for podcasters, if you're thinking of starting a podcast, do it about something that you would have a conversation about anyway and just record the conversation. If you're going to do it with a co-host, don't try and force it, because those really highly structured podcasts, especially there's so many true crime podcasts, they lose that conviviality and they lose that sort of relationship aspect that I think is all the podcasts that I listen to where they're co-hosted. That's what I want to hear. I want to drop in on two people who are clearly friends, clearly have a lot of love for each other and a lot of respect for each other, but will also go at each other and have a go, right? That's why I listen to the podcasts I listen to.
Yep. Now I'm going to ask Randy, who doesn't listen to any podcast, apparently, if he's got any advice for podcasters.
I really don't. I don't listen to podcasts. It's not to say I haven't. I've listened to a few, but yeah, no, I think that's solid advice. Just be yourself. It's just like any art form in the world. Is just do what you love and just try to be honest. And I don't know if you heard it. I stuck a couple lav mics on Kevin and we went for lunch, and we edited that down, and that was a podcast.
Cool.
So really, there's basically nothing stopping anybody from podcasting in this world. So there basically is no barrier. So yeah, just be honest and do what you love. That's exactly.
I think that
Go
the
on.
format. Sorry, but I was going to say like the format. I think you on top of that because I've listened to podcasts where it is just two people talking.
Yeah.
And now I drop into those. There's a good podcast out of Winnipeg, Sean Geek and Fast Brett podcast. It's just two brothers and they just have a conversation every week. There's no theme to it, but I think that just makes it a little bit harder to get started because people tell us all the time they come for Queen, but they stay for me and Randy. But at least at least that opens the door a little bit, right? So if these guys are talking about Queen, at least I know roughly what I'm going to be getting into. You know what I mean? So if you can find some kind of tenuous thread to get you sort of starting, that does help as well. It certainly helps you get noticed a little bit in the first place. So
Yeah, good point.
Yep. I like the format that you've got for your show where it starts where you're initially chatting with each other, quick bit of catch up, which I'm guessing you've already had a bit of catch up before you start recording anyway.
yeah.
It's almost like I'm almost 100% sure that occasionally Kev will just start the episode mid conversation, and he'll just go, we've already started recording, but you didn't know that. and and then you have the listener feedback from all the different versions and the what people have said about the previous episodes and the songs. And then you'll do the spin of the record, and then the little clips of songs which Kev is really smart at occasionally cutting in and going, oh, we've had a bit too much of that song. I think we need a bit of a break before we get into trouble. But that's good as well, where you'll stop it and you'll go, actually, this bit jumps out at me. And then that's cool. And then you make the vote, then rate it yourselves before you go to the chat as well. But yeah, like you said about the research, that's cool because you're not already prepared and you're just coming at it fresh. Makes it more interesting because then you're responding to those facts as opposed to already knowing what those facts were coming into it.
And just on the sort of the format side, that just developed organically over time again, right? That's sort of me when I sit down to editing because I do listen to lots of podcasts. Just trying to get the flow and trying to figure out, okay, do we need something here or do we cut straight to this? And especially like you said, there's always a natural entry point into a conversation and a natural exit point. So we used to I used to ask Randy stupid emergency questions. We kind of ended up dropping that because I felt it was forcing it a little bit. And again, it's that thing of it felt a bit like work rather than being natural. So now I always try and let Randy have the last word is my typical rule of thumb because he'll usually hit me with some sort of zing and I'm like, there you go, that's our end point. So just sort of having that vague idea of, okay, I think the flow works well when I do it this way. That's just developed over the last couple of years of editing lots and lots of podcasts. You sort of just get a sense for that. You know yourself, Marv. You can say, okay, I know that's the end, right? That's the natural end point. And we might have like another 5 minutes of good conversation, but that's the end point there. I've just got to lose that. And it's the same, Randy, right? When you're editing a song, it's like, yeah, I love that 8 bars of the solo I played, but the song as a whole just needs it to be a little bit tighter.
Yeah, sometimes I'm holding a boom over top of somebody. They're interviewing somebody, and I can look over at the director and the cameraman, and we know exactly they've stopped exactly where you want them to stop.
Yeah.
We know that's exactly where the editor is going to go, but then they keep talking for another 15 minutes. So I think we've just learned to spot the ending, and that's when we stop. So
yeah.
So almost a complete waste of time asking Randy this next one, isn't it? But who knows? What podcast do you like to listen to then?
Go ahead, Kev.
Okay, I've got a fairly lengthy list here, but I want to shout out mostly because I listen now mostly to indie podcasts.
Yep.
Obviously, everyone should be listening to Marv on Pods Like Us because you are one of the loveliest men in podcasting. And the Podcast Will Rock, the Van Halen show with my friend Corey and Mark Kameyer. The Power of Positive Geeking, which Corey has just rebooted, which is talking about films and TV that we love. Listen to my other shows, the Tom Petty Project and Ultimate Catalog Clash. I'll plug that. And Volume for All is a phenomenal music podcast about the history and philosophy of heavy metal. Marv, you definitely have to have Quinn on. This guy has sort of scripted this show. He's a writer, actor. Like, it's one of those shows that is sort of the gold standard for that type of podcast. It's absolutely fantastic. So go listen to that one. Our friends, Randy and I's friends, Ian and Michael, do The Lord of Adder's Black about Blackadder, which is a fantastic podcast. Honest and Unmerciful, a record review podcast by my friends Pete Nestor and Brian Ruskin, is a really good album review podcast. The Regarding series, which is currently covering Van Halen 3, on which I did a bit of editing where we re-edited all the songs on Van Halen 3 to try and make them a little bit better, which again is extraordinarily arrogant when we're trying to improve Eddie Van Halen's work, but we gave that a go anyway. Pod of Thunder, which is sort of the grandfather of our show. It's the show that Corey based his show on. It's about the Kiss catalogue. I don't like Kiss particularly, but that's a really entertaining show. And then just a couple of other ones. Bang, 101 songs about nuclear war from the 80s. That's Pank, who's in part of the Queen community. And then the commercial ones that I listen to, Off Menu, Rehulstapur with Richard Herring, Taskmaster, and Three Bean Salad. Those are really the only ones left that I listen to out of the commercial podcast space. So I do a lot of podcast listening too.
Now for a shorter list from Randy.
I've listened to I think 3 or 4 of ours Seaside Pod review, and then I find mistakes and I say, Kev, hey, did you get a chance to go in and fix that mistake? And he doesn't fix them, so I don't know why I'm listening to them, Kevin. And then I listen to one of those a murder podcast one time on an airplane. That's it. I don't listen to podcasts.
Cool.
Sorry.
Terrible guest.
I'm fine with that. It's all right. Everybody else can talk around him.
It's my running joke that Randy's like recorded and hosted 200 times more podcasts than he's ever listened to. It's not quite that many, but it's at least 100.
Yeah. I've recorded podcasts for people and edited podcasts, so I guess I listened to that one. That was about the monkeys, that one, and other ones too. But yeah, anyhow, yeah.
What was that one? What was that one about the monkeys?
Yeah, it was all about the monkeys. I have no idea where it went. I gave it to the guy, and I assume he uploaded it. I have no idea where it went. He would record it on his phone and then send it to me with a little script, and I would just break it down and insert his stuff in. Yeah, I don't know what he's even called.
I can't remember what it's called either. But weirdly, a guest that I had on my Tom Petty project listens to that podcast or listened to that podcast.
I think if he's doing it, it's not with me. But yeah, Mark Kleiner was the host. Great guy. I liked him a lot.
Yeah. Great musician too.
Yes.
If I wanted the noise of clicky clacky of the keyboard on my microphone, I'd look it up. There you go. It worked for everybody. Everybody contact me and tell me what that show is called. Okay. Another one to add to the plethora of shows that I listen to. Right. So where can people get hold of the show and get in touch with you? Randy?
No, Kev. No, you do the talking. This is all
Seaside Pod Review. Seaside Pod Review on Blue Sky and Facebook. We are no longer on Twitter. And yeah, we got a Discord channel. So if you go to any of our episodes, in the episode notes, there's a link to our Discord channel. We'd love to have you in there. We've got a very healthy, entertaining, enjoyable community that we've built up over the last couple of years. Come check it out.
I forgot to mention, before I do the sign out, I'm going to say this. Another cool thing is the relationship that you've got with other Queen podcasters.
Yeah. I started listening to, the reason that I picked Queen actually to sort of run at Randy with this was In the Lap of the Pods is 3 guys from Glasgow who I hugely entertaining. And again, even if you can imagine it, Randy, even more sweary than we are on our show. Great guys. And I've ended up being sort of supporting, oh geez, his name's gone now, the Misty Music Podcast anyway. David started a show called the Misty Music Podcast, also excellent, but doesn't always release episodes very regularly, but great guys. I've had lots of interactions with them. We've had Rowan Archera and Paul Bradbury from Radio Pod, a good relationship with those guys. Recovering Queen, that's the only Queen podcast that I haven't listened to religiously, because I was talking about this with some of our listeners, that I didn't want to listen to someone else talking about a song before I'd had a chance for us to do it, because I didn't want to get that I didn't want to poison the well. And so I've been sort of starting to go back now and listen to the episodes where they've covered songs that we have. And so for anyone who doesn't know, those guys actually cover a Queen song in every episode. One of them picks it up, and they're all multi-instrumentalists, they're all amazing. And the amount of work that they put into those episodes is absolutely staggering, something that I could certainly never do. So, yeah.
They've certainly got more time than I have.
Yeah. But I think it's that thing. Indie podcasters, especially, a rising tide does float all boats. So we should all be supporting each other and not competing.
Absolutely. Right. Thanks for speaking with me today, guys.
Thanks a lot for having us on, Marv.
Yeah. Thanks, Marv. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. And you can contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. And there's also a Patreon page. If you look, patreon.com/podslikeus. But anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.